We talked a couple of years ago when your book, Rick Nelson, Rock and Roll Pioneer, was out. How did it do?
Pretty good, a lot better than the first one, and I got a lot of wonderful reviews. People were saying, it's the best book ever written on Rick, and you really knew him well, which I did, and I never met or spoke to him, and to hear people say that was really cool. So, I was really pleased with the reception from people, and it took me 2.5 years to write, so that was gratifying to hear all those wonderful reviews.
Okay. Well, that's good, and of course, folks can still go out and get it, though.
Oh, yeah, it's still available.
Okay. All right. Now, you mentioned the book before. Now, that was your first book, wasn't it? The Rockabilly book.
Yeah, I had a Rockabilly one. It was called Catch That Rockabilly Fever. That's still available for sale, too. It had 46 different people in it. Rick was in that one as well, but Elvis and Buddy Holly and Wanda Jackson, and it was all, different Rockabilly people that, mostly from the 50s.
Okay. All right. Now, the book you've got out is called Dig That Beat, Interviews with Musicians at the Root of Rock and Roll, and there's a lot of rockabilly in that, too.
Yeah, I tried to mix it up a little bit, though, with different genres, because my publisher said, we don't want just a bunch of leftovers, in the respect that some people I didn't get to include in the first one, so they said, we don't just want that. Can you mix it up a little bit? So I threw some traditional country artists in there, like Buck Owens and Conway Twitty and Billy Swan and Leroy Van Dyke. And then I went ahead and did some 50s pop, Dodie Stevens, Robin Luke, and Carl Dobkins Jr., and then some rhythm and blues, Dale Hawkins, Big J McNeely, and the Orlons. Okay,
all right. Well, we're going to highlight some of these folks that, people may not know so much about here in just a minute. Now, are these interviews that you've done over the years, or what? Because a lot of these guys aren't around anymore.
Newer ones in the respect that, the last couple years, but the majority of them are on the older side, like anywhere from 2002 until now.
Okay. Because a lot of these guys aren't around anymore. So
No. Well, what happened, sometimes if a person isn't living, then I'll talk to a musician or a producer that worked with them. Like Buck Owens, for example. I never got to speak with him, unfortunately, even though I love his music. But I tracked down the original drummer of the Buckaroos, Willie Cantu, and spoke with him, and he gave me a lot of great stories. And it was the same way with Conway Twitty. I never interviewed him, but I found some musicians that, original musicians, and then one that worked with him later. So that's very helpful if you can't talk to the original person to get, musicians or producers. Whenever possible, I try to talk with the artist directly, and you're right, there are even some of those that aren't with us anymore. Like, for example, Dale Hawkins, he passed away a few years back, but I was lucky to speak with him on 4 different occasions.
Okay, yeah, and hopefully you get accurate information, because I know a lot of these folks, they start, even the person themselves starts telling kind of what's in the press and not really what what really happened, in some of these instances. So,
well, it's funny you should mention that. I've interviewed people already, and I've kind of corrected them because I've read stuff and heard stuff, and they don't know, and then I correct them, and they get mad about that. So good. But in regard to that, if I find a mistake that someone happens to make in regard to a date or a place or whatever, I go ahead and correct that on my end, because I hate mistakes in books. So I try to be as careful as possible with spellings and dates and places and, facts in general.
Right.
But I do notice that sometimes there's differing opinions, like Susie Q, for example, by Dale Hawkins. They don't know exactly who was doing the hand claps on there. So I have like 3 different accounts of that in the book, and also they don't know for sure the bass player. There's, differing accounts because the union said somebody else, and then I talked to a guy that said, no, that was me that played on there, and so, I try to include everything so then people can, I guess, decide for themselves, because if they don't know, how is anybody else going to know,
Yeah, and it's, I say that because I'm a big Beach Boys fan, and this new Brian Wilson movie that came out last week, I've been seeing posts by some of the different people who were involved, like Carol Kay. I mean, she was a bass player on a lot of records, not just theirs, but she would come out and say, well, okay, in the movie there's this and this didn't really happen, and that there's some other guys too that have come out, but that's a movie, and sometimes they kind of embellish or maybe combine characters to kind of, I guess, for time, but anyway.
They do that too, I think, to Hollywoodize it.
Yeah.
Like Walk the Line. I don't know if you saw that movie about Johnny Cash.
Yeah.
There were a lot of mistakes in there as well, and I think they kind of do that with all biopics, to dramatize it, maybe to make it more interesting, and it's unfortunate that there's factual mistakes, but it's entertaining, so what are you going to do? At least they're, showcasing the music for more audiences.
Yeah. Well, now, you rattled off a bunch of names. How many artists do you include in this new book?
There's 39 in this one.
39, okay. And how many pages?
I don't have, unfortunately, fortunately and unfortunately, I don't have a book myself yet. I keep selling them off.
Oh, okay.
So I don't even have a copy on hand, but I do believe it's 244 pages, and that includes a selected discography in the back, which was new, too. I mean, my Rick Nelson one had that, but my first Rockabilly one did not. And that was another thing. The publisher said, you need to add something different. So I said, how about a discography? And so there's a discography in the back.
Okay. Would it be too impolite to ask how old you are?
No, that's okay. I'm 36.
Well, how did you get interested in all this old music?
Well, my mom was a teenager in the 50s, so she has a massive record collection. And when I was about 16... she said, will you help me reorganize it, renumber it? So we went through it, and I had always heard like Elvis and Fats Domino and Jerry Lee Lewis because she played that music all the while I was growing up, but I wasn't really a fan until I was like 16. And like I said, we were going through the records, and she says, you should play this, you should play that. And, it was like Ricky Nelson and Carl Perkins and Wanda Jackson and some of the blues guys like Jackie Wilson or rhythm and blues, Jackie Wilson and Sam Cooke and, different people. And she said, I think you would like this. Or I would say, what does this one sound like? So we were playing a bunch of records, and that's how I got really into all the different genres, so to speak. But she's not a big country fan. I kind of discovered that on my own, just by listening, I guess, to the radio and the internet. YouTube is wonderful for that, and different people suggesting different artists, and it's kind of a ripple effect. You talk to one person, and they might like somebody, and they say, you should listen to so-and-so. Like, for example, I'll give these guys a plug because I think they deserve it. The Cactus Blossoms are from Minneapolis, and they sound a lot like the Everly Brothers. Well, a friend of mine said, if you like the Everly Brothers, I think you'll like them. So I went and saw them recently, and now I'm a fan of theirs. So.
Oh, okay. Well, and the internet has been great for some of these artists that otherwise most folks never would have heard of.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's certainly true with the rockabilly artists, and I didn't really get into rockabilly until like 2002. So that's 13 years ago. I was 23 then. I wasn't really familiar with rockabilly before that. Like I said, I knew Elvis and Jerry Lee and some of the other guys that did it. But it was thanks to a Sun Records compilation set that I had bought. And I mainly bought it because of the songs by Elvis and Carl Perkins and Jerry Lee. But then there were other ones on there like Ray Smith and Sonny Burgess and Billy Lee Riley. And I was like, whoa, who are these people? So I started, listening, and I became, a big fan of all of them as well. And Ray Smith isn't with us, unfortunately, anymore. But I've gotten to see Sonny many times. I saw Billy Lee a few times. So it's great when you dig deeper. And another thing that I noticed, too, like if you talk to an artist like Dale Hawkins, for example, he really loved Jimmy Reed. And I didn't know who Jimmy Reed was. I mean, I heard of him, but I wasn't familiar with his music. And when I interviewed him last, that was 2009, he says to me, do you know Jimmy Reed? And I said, no, I'm not familiar. And so, unfortunately, he never got to know because I didn't check him out until after he died. But I went on YouTube, and I started listening to all this stuff by Jimmy Reed, and I said, wow, he's really good. So he's like my favorite blues artist now. So sometimes an artist mentions a name, and you go look them up, and you become a fan that way, too.
Yeah. I play some Jimmy Reed stuff, and some of these other ones, too. Going back to some of these stories, were there any that kind of took you by surprise, maybe blindsided you and maybe blew some preconceptions that that you may have had?
Well, not really. I mean, I don't know if you could say that. I mean, it was interesting sometimes to hear how many takes they had to do on a song, like Robin Luke, Susie Darlin'. There was like 7 overdubs on it. So he said it sounds really mashed together. And he actually had re-recorded it. Dot Records wanted him. He had recorded that in Hawaii, like in a bedroom, with an echo chamber that was in the bathroom.
Oh.
It was really primitive, and they did their own instrumentation with like a pen and, you know, all these weird things. And then Dot Records said, well, if we're going to release it, we want you to come to Hollywood and record it here. So he came and he recorded it, and it wasn't anything like it because, you know, they had this pristine sound.
Yeah.
It was very crisp and clear. And they said, oh, we hate it. We want the Hawaii version. So that's the version that ended up being released. And so that was kind of a revelation. You know, it made me wonder, you know. But then I got a cool story. This isn't like a big thing that I wasn't aware of and made aware of, but it's a cool story about Dale Hawkins. This guy that worked with him as a piano player, Alan Harris, he needed to get back home to Monroe, Louisiana. This was in Shreveport, and he was out on the curb hitching a ride. Before you know it, Dale Hawkins pulls up in his little MG3 convertible. He says, hey, Alan, what's going on? He says, oh, man, I'm trying to get home. My car broke down. He says, oh, hop in. I'll give you a ride. They get in the car, and unfortunately back then a lot of people popped bennies,
yeah,
uppers, and so Dale was getting kind of tired, and he says, Alan, you want to take over? And he did, and before you know it, Alan started getting tired of driving, and Dale says, I got something that'll keep you awake. So he gives him one of the bennies, you know, and he says, oh, that kept me awake already. I could have driven to China. But anyway, they're going along, and what had happened was he was going to take him home to Monroe, but while Dale was driving, he convinced Alan to come with him to the American Bandstand, the Alan Freed Show, and then go to Chicago for a recording. So they went around, and, you know, we're going to the East Coast. And when Alan was driving, that was when they got picked up by the cops. And this was in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Got pulled over. The cop says, license and registration, please. And he gives it to him, and he says, whose car is this? He says, oh, this is Dale Hawkins. Dale was sleeping at the time in the passenger seat.
Yeah.
And the cop says, the Dale Hawkins? The one who sings Susie Q? And he says, yeah, that's him. So he nudges him. He says, Dale, wake up. And Dale's like, what, you know? And he says, are you Dale Hawkins? And he says, yeah, I'm Dale Hawkins. He says, all right, follow me to the station. So they go to the police station, and they're like, oh, man, we're going to be in trouble. Maybe they'll put us in the pokey and give us a ticket, or what are they going to do, you know? And the cop says, bring your guitar in with you. So Dale goes in, and he makes him sing Susie Q. And as soon as that happens, he's let off the hook. And they're back on the road again. But I thought that was like the coolest story. So
yeah, that sounds like an Andy Griffith episode.
Yeah. So that's in the book, and that was very memorable for me. Probably the most memorable story that stood out.
Okay, yeah, I play Susie Q from time to time. Ronnie Hawkins, you know, his cousin, I play some of his songs. 40 Days, One of These Days, Mary Lou. Now you mentioned Buck Owens, Conway Twitty. You know, most of those are, of course, folks now connect with country music, and you know, I play some of their early songs, some of Conway Twitty's. Of course, oh, good grief, I'm going blank on that, the big one.
It's Only Make Believe?
It's Only Make Believe, yeah.
Yeah.
And then his version of Danny Boy. Mm-hmm. And then Buck Owens, I had been playing, you know, I got a Tiger by the Tail, but then I, kind of getting ready for this interview, I listened to some of his earlier things, and it's, Hot Dog is one that I listened to, and that's kind of a fun song. So I added that one to my list here. Well, you know, those two guys, and a lot of the country people actually try their hand at rockabilly, but yeah, excuse
me, Conway and Buck both had rockabilly singles out. I would say that Hot Dog is a rockabilly tune.
Yeah,
and they had that. They tried that before they went in the country field. But I love Buck's '60s material, the early '60s, like Act Naturally, and I've got a
that's
Tiger
another
by
one.
the Tail and Under Your Spell Again, and all those great songs. He and the Buckaroos had a very tight sound there, and they melded together so well.
Yeah.
They developed that Bakersfield sound.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's hit some of these other names that folks might not recognize. Now, of course, we've talked rockabilly a lot, but you said you mixed it up. Big J McNeely, he was not a rockabilly.
No, he's a rhythm and blues singer, and he started already in the 40s, the late 40s. He was very popular in the L.A. area. That's because that's where he's from. He's from Watts. And he used to do a lot of club bookings with his brother, and he actually did incite a riot a few times. He was banned from playing L.A. because the teenagers just went wild. And the reason they went wild, I guess, is because he had quite a stage show. He'd get on the floor. He'd, walk out into the audience playing his saxophone and, do just all these crazy, crazy things, crawl on the floor, and the cops had a hard time keeping the kids in check because, he really, really amped it up.
When I read where sometimes he would even just go out the door and the audience would follow him out onto the sidewalk or the street or whatever. I read where he got taken to jail once, and his band is still in there playing inside the club waiting for him to come back.
Yeah, that's true. That did happen. Yep. And I think he had to spend the night in jail, in fact, because they didn't even know he was gone. They just kept on playing. So yeah, it was pretty crazy back then. And then he did a show once with Lionel Hampton, because Lionel Hampton had asked him to do it, and it was at Wrigley Field out in L.A. And he really put on a spectacle there. He was up in the grandstands and, slid in the home plate, or crawled in the home plate, I should say, on his back, playing the sax and just really going all out. And the crowd loved him so much. The next day it's his Hometown Boy Steel show. And Lionel Hampton never worked with him again because of that. He said, I don't want you on the show.
Oh, man. Oh. All right, well, moving along. Here's an interesting name, Sleepy LaBeef.
Sleepy LaBeef, yeah, he tried to be on Sun Records like a lot of those guys, and at the time it just, didn't come together. So he actually went to Starday, and then he was on another label, Gold Star, I do believe, and he had some recordings, but he wasn't really that well known in the 50s. It wasn't until the revival started happening in the late 70s that he started playing a lot. He was doing like 300 dates a year. I think he's slowed down considerably in recent years because he's getting up there. He's like 80.
Yeah.
But back in the day, like the 70s, 80s, he was playing a lot. Peter Guralnick was good friends with him, and he saw him play a lot. In fact, he wrote about him in a couple of his books. And he's quite the artist. He can throw songs together you would never think would go together, and it must be craziness for band members because there's never a rehearsal. It's just like he gets up there and he'll throw I Walk the Line together with America the Beautiful and goes into Don't Be Cruel.
Wow.
Throws all these songs together that you would never think would work, but because of the same chord. I just made that up, by the way. I don't know for sure if that's
okay.
One of his medleys, but just weird mixtures,
Uh-huh.
And so he'll get up there and do that, and of course the band's like, okay, where are we going now, So he says, he's always keeping his band on their toes because they don't know what direction he's going to go into. He used to have regular band members, but because of the problems with the clubs nowadays not being able to afford, a whole band, usually he comes in and works with a house band.
Oh.
So it's just like whoever's up there plays with him. And
oh, boy.
sometimes that can be hard. I interviewed a couple of the guys that worked with him, and he's like, yeah, this is murder. No rehearsal. You just get up there and you wing it. You better be on your top game, otherwise, you're in trouble. So
yeah. Another name, now, Janice Martin. Now, she was one of the few women who sang rockabilly. I play some of her songs. Well, 2 or 3 of her songs. My Boy Elvis, Drugstore Rock and Roll, Ooby Dooby, her version of Ooby Dooby. They called her the female Elvis.
Yeah, the RCA gave her that title, and she hated it at first because she wanted to make her own name. She's like, no, I don't want to be known as the female Elvis. I want to capitalize on what I'm doing. But she changed her mind when she saw Elvis in concert. She was like, wow, he's a lot like me. I am. So she decided, yeah, I'll take that title. So, and Elvis and Colonel Tom Parker were really nice about it, and they were like, yeah, we don't care if she uses that. And I think Elvis even sent her roses a couple times, and I think she met him once. And but yeah, she was pretty wild back in the day in the respect that she wasn't the typical like country singer where, you know, she would be dressed up with Western clothing and a cowboy hat type thing. She'd kick off her shoes, you know, and dance all around, and she just didn't stand there and play. She was moving and shaking it. So she caused quite a sensation, and RCA actually mistakenly, I think, labeled her as the typical like teenager next door. Well, that image was busted when she went overseas with Jim Reeves for a tour, and Janice's husband, I should say, came to visit her. This was a USO tour, and while they were there, she got pregnant. So she comes back, she's like 16, 17, and she didn't tell RCA, of course. They didn't even know she was married because she had eloped.
Yeah. And
she comes back, and she's like 9 months pregnant, and she's recording her last session for RCA because at that point they were like, okay, you busted our image, we're not going to promote you anymore.
Oh.
So actually they had suggested she have an abortion even.
Oh, good.
She says, I'm not going to do that. But anyway, so she had her, you know, last session, and she's recording, and she said that the producer, Steve Scholes, which was Elvis's producer at RCA there, he was in the control booth with tears rolling down his face because it had busted the whole image that he tried so hard to create.
Oh.
And she was let go, and she didn't do anything then for quite a while. She had a couple releases, but it wasn't really anything. Again, it wasn't until the revival came around in the 70s and Europe was calling that she went back into it.
When I had read where she had eloped, I think she was about 15 when she eloped, and, you know, I think her parents were against it, of course, but then they let it go, but her mom, you know, made her keep it a secret, though, anyway. So
yeah, you're right. That's what happened. That's why RCA didn't know about it until she was over with Jim Reeves in, I don't know what country they were in, maybe Germany, overseas anyway. And her manager says to her, "Who's this?" And she says, "Oh, it's my husband." Her husband had come to visit. She said, "Husband?" And so right away he gets on the phone and says, "Hey, RCA," you know, the people at RCA, "Hey, did you know that Janice is married?" You know, and oh, they had a fit. Oh, they were mad.
Well, all right, let's move on here now. You don't stay with these old timers. James Envelt is another artist that you feature, but like I say, he's not one of those guys from back in the day. He's a rockabilly musician, but he's also an actor and film director from nowadays. Oh
yeah. Well, just like in the first book, it's not all 50s artists. I have a lot of newer people in that one as well, but with this one, I always like to give props to the people that are keeping the music going, because the 50s legends aren't going to be around forever. As you know, a lot of them, you know, are older now, and they're slowing down and maybe not even performing, and unfortunately a lot of them are dead. So people like James Enfield and Rosie Flores and the Paladins and Big Sandy and Deke Dickerson, all those people are keeping the flame going, so to speak. So I wanted to give, you know, credit to, you know, their legacies as well. And James is a great artist in his own right. Right now he's playing bass with the Mavericks.
Okay.
He's on the road with them. I just saw them a couple months ago. But James, I wouldn't call him a rockabilly necessarily. I call him more of a country artist. He does more country material.
Okay.
But he had his roots in rockabilly, and he still does some rockabilly stuff. But yeah, he did the vocals for Cry Baby, the John Waters movie, and he's written some, you know, soundtracks for movies and directed some and acted in some music videos like with Trisha Yearwood and George Strait, and so he kind of has his hand in everything. He's kept quite busy besides touring now with the Mavericks and then doing his own shows too.
Okay, and I mentioned the Beach Boys a while ago. I saw where he played drummer Hal Blaine in one of those older Beach Boys TV movies. Of course, Hal was with the Wrecking Crew, but I had not.
You told me something I didn't know. I didn't even know that. So
really, well, see, whenever I went looking up some of these names, because I didn't recognize Sleepy LaBeef or Big J McNeely, and then when I got to him, I thought that picture that I first saw, I thought that looks like a current picture, and so I got to reading about him, and I was like, okay, I'll have to. I'd seen that movie, but I couldn't remember. Of course, that was one of those supporting roles, so I wouldn't have remembered what he looked like.
Yeah, he's got quite a resume, not just for movies, but also CDs that he's appeared on. He's only done 3 himself where they're solo releases, but he's played with so many people. I think he's appeared on every Rosie Flores CD, and Dwight Yoakam he's been with, and the list just goes on and on. I mean, I didn't even include all of it in the discography. I had no idea that he was as prestigious, but he's been in the business for like 30 years, so I guess that's, a definite possibility, but he's definitely kept busy, and I asked him when I interviewed him, I said, do you like acting or music better? And he says equally as well, and that kind of gets him in trouble sometimes because you can't do both at the same time necessarily.
Yeah.
So right now, I guess he's focusing on his music, and hopefully we'll see a new CD out of him pretty soon. He keeps teasing us with that. I haven't seen it yet, but hopefully pretty soon. But he's a great entertainer, a very nice guy, and any success that he gets, he certainly deserves.
Well, now you talked about these folks who are keeping the rockabilly music alive. You wrote your own rockabilly magazine for a while,
right?
And still contribute to rockabilly magazine, Blue Suede News.
Yeah. Actually, for 2 years I had a rockabilly magazine, and I did all the writing, and I paid for the production and all that, but it was just too difficult to try to get subscribers and advertisers and keep that going. So that's how all my interviews got accumulated, though.
Oh, okay.
I was doing interviews, and I thought, I'll put so-and-so in the magazine. Well, then I had all these interviews and didn't know what to do with them. And my mom and some of my friends were like, well, don't just let them sit there and rot. Write a book. And I said, I don't know how to write a book. And this was with my first one. I was back in, 2007. 2006, 2007.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know how to write a book. And they're like, it's easy. I'll show you how. I have a couple writer friends. And so my writer friend that lives in Arizona, he's like, I'll help you come up with a proposal and all this good stuff. So before you know it, I start sending out proposals. And then McFarlane contacted me. I don't know if I had gotten in touch with them or not. I must have. And they kept bugging me and saying, what have you done with that proposal? What have you done with that manuscript? And I said, I haven't done anything with it. So finally, I decided, all right, they're interested. They've contacted me 3 times. So I went ahead and went with them. And I'm glad I did, because every publisher has its pros and cons. But one thing I like about working with them, they let me write about what I want to write about. I don't know if I could write about these obscure artists for anybody else.
Yeah. Well, now this Blue Suede News, can folks go online and check out your articles there, or is it just a hard copy?
Oh, no, you can go online. It's bluesuedenews.com, and they've been in production for 30 years. And I'm going to have an article, hopefully a big article, hopefully the cover story, actually. The next magazine, I was talking about the Cactus Blossoms earlier. I just interviewed those guys, and it's going to be a full-length article on them in there. Okay.
Is this a monthly deal?
No, it's a quarterly thing, so 4 times a year he puts that out.
Okay. All right, well, your book is Dig That Beat, Interviews with Musicians at the Root of Rock and Roll. Where can we get that?
McFarlandBooks.com, so that's McFarland books.com. Amazon has it. If you go to Barnes & Noble, you can order it. They also have it at barnesandnoble.com. Actually, I don't think that's the website, but you know what I mean. If you Google Barnes & Noble, you can find it. And then oldies.com has it, and basically if you Google it, you can find it as well.
Okay. All right. And, of course, you said fans can also get your previous 2 books, I guess, at least at Amazon anyway.
Oh, McFarland has it. Barnes and Noble. All those places have those as well.
Okay.
So they're still available as long as there's people buying it. They'll continue to produce it. So.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate you taking your time out and talking about your books.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Tim, and I hope everybody enjoyed hearing my stories, and hope you guys decide to go out and pick up, at least this book, if not all three. So thanks for the support.
Okay. When you've got another one coming out, give me a holler.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.